what are some of the must-have tools to create effective communication, accountability, intensity, whilst also creating this level of inclusion, flexibility, because people are working remotely, and autonomy. So you've talked about culture. What are the other things that you think are like you've got to have this?
I'm also a really big fan of a tool called 15.5. So what I love about 15.5 is I think they describe themselves as like a performance management tool, performance management in the positive context.
Sure.
So what I love...
We're talking enablement, we're talking autonomy.
Enablement, feedback, all that kind of great stuff. So there's a few parts to 15.5. There is kind of the weekly or fortnightly accountability measure. So that is kind of a short report or a survey that gets sent to an employee once every fortnight or once every week. It's very customizable, so you can set it up for what works for you, where they check in on how they're feeling, mark off their priorities from their previous report, like did they get done what they thought they were going to get done, what are the wins that they've had, what are the roadblocks that they've experienced. And then there's also a part in the regular report that what's the word I'm looking for here, encourages peer-to-peer recognition, which is awesome. That report then gets sent to their manager for review, and what is super powerful is you can, from that report, create a one-on-one agenda. So it then helps you to move into the next phase, I guess, of the conversation.
Because so many managers struggle with, we're having a one-on-one.
What are we going to talk about?
Right, or we just end up talking, and there's actually there's no follow-up to come from, no action.
Exactly. It's just a rich conversation,
which is great,
fantastic. But it doesn't create that accountability that I think we're all looking for. So it feeds into that one-on-one agenda, which is a shared agenda. What are our talking points? What are our action items from this one-on-one? And then it gives you a space to write notes, shared notes, but also private notes.
Right.
So if you're a manager and you have a team member, maybe they're going through a tough time, maybe you want to keep a note of that.
Right.
Just for your own personal record.
Okay.
It also has a fantastic tool around reviews at whatever cadence your organization feels is appropriate. Maybe you do quarterly reviews, annual reviews, employment anniversary reviews, whatever that looks like for you. And the beautiful thing is, kind of like Culture Amp, and that Culture Amp will keep your data so you can compare yourself to how you were 5 years ago. 15.5 will keep that. The report feeds into the one-on-one, which feeds into the review cycle. So
it feeds back to that whole capability development that we talked about in the last season, right? So we know what we're trying to address. We know how we're trying to progress.
So I personally really love 15.5 for that accountability piece, for prompting feedback both ways. And for a lot of like flexibility and autonomy as well, because if you have a fantastic one-on-one with your manager once every week or once every fortnight, and you have clear goals and you're both on the same page about that, cool. It's like, let's check in on this next time. We both know what we need to do. You've got your action items, I've got mine, kind of like, let's just go to it. Which, I think is fantastic. And it also enables you to input, they call it OKRs, so objective key results. And you can do company objectives that feed into team objectives, that feed into individual objectives, and the tool keeps track of it. And so every time, say somebody has an individual objective for a quarter, every time they pull up that weekly or fortnightly report that they need to submit to their manager, 15.5 will prompt them to give feedback on how they're going against their OKR.
I could talk about OKR forever. I love the whole concept, right? Linking it from company strategy down to actual activities of work. Look.
So you're sold, right? So you kind of got the purpose, tick with the OKRs. You've got the mastery with the different feedback tools, and then autonomy. If you're both clear on what you need to do between now and your next one-on-one, cool, like go and get on with it. So I personally love 15.5. I've used it in a bunch of organizations and set up really well, and it's super customizable as well. So if you don't have anything, I would highly recommend looking into that. And then also on the tools front, when it comes to kind of creating great mindsets and high performing teams, I think we can all be a little bit confused around like basic things. How do we use Slack? If somebody Slacks you, are you supposed to get back to them straight away? Do we use it asynchronously? Or should I email you if I don't expect a response from you straight away? And so, you know, as we all know, comms can get really lost in Slack. You know, you're scrolling up, where did the conversation start? So having really clear guidelines, I think, around how you use the different tools.
I totally agree. I had this wonderful conversation probably about 18 months with someone I work with, and they said, look, if you contact me on Slack, expect a response by the end of the day.
Yeah.
Contact me on email, expect a response in a week.
Yeah.
Contact me as a call, I'll try and answer, but if I don't, expect the same cadence as Slack. If you text me, I will respond within 6 hours. And I was like, okay, cool. This is my communication protocol, right? I know what's going on there. And it wasn't dictatorial. It was kind of like, this is how I use the communication mediums.
Yeah. And that's all we need, right? Is just some guidelines. And so I would really take a look internally at the different communication tools that you use, and does everybody have the same context around why how we use the tools like we do? A great internal wiki, you know, I know a lot of dev teams use things like Confluence, which is fantastic, but for those who are not so technically minded, Confluence can be kind of hard to navigate, in my opinion. I've used an awesome kind of internal wiki tool called Honey, which is like a beautiful UI, really easy. But you can also use things like I'm pretty sure if you have if your organization uses the Google Suite, you know, like Gmail and Calendar and Docs, they have their own wiki tool that they offer for free, or just alongside your, you know, Google for Business. So yeah, I would take a look at that in terms of, you know, SaaS companies, we all have like a big old list of acronyms, right, that we say to each other, and for somebody new, are they going to know all those acronyms? So a glossary for people. An index, or, you know, how do we record the decisions that we make? How do we use the different tools that we use? So yeah, I think how are you communicating and what the guidelines are around that is really key information.
Okay. And, you know, like, I imagine that we're heading into the era where, you know, Agile has been operationalized. But do you see any particular processes or routines that are particularly powerful for virtual environments?
So at Airbnb, they had a really strong culture of one-on-ones. And one of the tools that they developed was, stay with me on this, elephants, dead fish, and vomit. And it's I know, and it's a question or it's a set of questions that a manager can ask at, you know, whatever time period is appropriate for this conversation. So elephants being, what's the elephant in the room right now? What are people not saying? What's super obvious, but nobody's calling it out? Dead fish. So like the smell of dead fish will just linger and linger and linger. So what's like an old problem that we're still feeling the effects of right now, still hanging around? And then vomit, it's just word vomit. Maybe you got something to say, you want to say it in just like a totally safe space, no judgment, just blah, 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 get it out there. Elephants, dead fish, and vomit. And asking those questions once every 6 months, man, you get some gold out of there. And that is on top of, if we assume everybody has an agile kind of mindset, we assume people are communicating regularly about how they're blocked. We assume teams are having times to reflect and what went well, what didn't go well. So if I assume all those things, then I think elephants, dead fish, and vomit for me personally is like the cherry on top of the cake to really get the can I swear? No, the crap out there.
Right. It was exposed the stuff.
Yeah, exposed.
Underlying, right?
Yeah.